to your congressman, call them. You would wait for your direct mail pieces to tell you what was the big issues and either call or send a letter. It was very time consuming. It was very expensive. Today, my group, Campaign for Liberty, my employer, we can do emails and get to people directly and then have the effects felt more immediately. And there's a lot of self-starting going on today. You see candidates, fundraising, having events. You see protests and other forms of activism being planned on Facebook, totally under the radar screen, and then we hit them hard, we hit them fast, and because it was all done very quickly through social media, through the internet, they don't know what's, the other side, the establishment, can be really caught flat-footed. I think that's what happened with Syria, with the Obamacare, the funding effort. That's obviously a big part of Senator Paul's success with the filibuster was that it got out on Twitter, on Facebook, and on the rest of the social media, whereas even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, people would have had to wait till it cycled through the news cycles to find out about it. Now everybody knew about it as it was happening and was calling their senators as Rand was on the floor, saying, I don't see you down there standing with Rand. Get your behind down there now. So that's how I think it has really changed.
So, Laura, I read it. So the barbarians are at the gates. They're more than the gates. They're coming over the gates. How much does that scare the establishment right in this city?
I think they're incredibly frightened. I'm not 100% sold on whether that's always a really, really good thing, because I think that at times it leads people into, it leads the Republican Party into boxing themselves into sort of untenable solutions because they're just so afraid of being primary. So I think that there's positive aspects and negative aspects. I think that we have seen very, very little creative policy making in Washington from conservatives. We see it some, but they seem to sort of want to grab onto the lower hanging fruit. I'm a little bit encouraged by the rise of the monthly tax plan. I think that's a huge step forward, and it was a little bit interesting to see somebody wanting to go that far out on a limb. Presumably he is very safe, but people are very, very scared, and so I think we sort of end up in the same repetitive conversation where they are working on very admirable goals like defunding Obamacare, but I think at times it comes to the detriment of other things that could be discussed because people aren't really willing to sort of go out on a limb and say how should we restructure unemployment given that we're having the longest unemployment crisis ever, or how should we restructure these other programs and sort of like slash and cut, which has its merits, but also maybe doesn't give solutions that are going to be broadly acceptable across the larger population. So I think it's a double-edged sword, but I mean in general in the sense that it's refreshing to see people in Washington actually scared of getting kicked out for once. That's probably a good sea change, I guess.
If I could just jump in, I think it's the issue of defunding Obamacare.
The Republican establishment, the establishment of the city, had no interest in defunding Obamacare for a certain period of time. It was the Tea Party Patriots, and there was Brent Bozell and For America, which is a Facebook page with 4 million people on it, and Dave Bossie and some other people, and the Freedom Works guys. They had this idea in early August during the recess. Let's go have rallies. Let's start that. And all of a sudden, people were mocking that effort, right? This thing would never get to a vote in the House. And 5 weeks ago, that was a fantasy. And people like Brent Bozell, who is part of the conservative establishment, who I think sees opportunity with new media and this new fire in this populist movement, that after a series of rallies, after a series of town halls at John Boehner's hometown, you start to see this thing pick up momentum. I mean, the vote last week that Speaker Boehner called was historic because the establishment said, absolutely in no circumstances are we going to have that vote. And 4 weeks later or 5 weeks later, after this huge surge in people hitting this Facebook page and all that, they had a vote and voted to defund Obamacare. And Senator Cruz and Senator Mike Lee, the exact same thing. People mock these guys. And whether they could technically defund Obamacare at the end of the day, you have certainly seen a tectonic plate shift on the leadership of this movement and the leadership of this party and the leadership of Los Angeles in the last 6 weeks, I believe, because of social media and because people were not taking action and were prepared to be the junior partner in the slow walk to statism that we're going to, which is to me the equivalent of the Republican/Whig Party.
Okay, Lori, briefly, and I want to get to Brittany.
Sure.
With all due respect.
Right, and so to the extent that we are seeing leadership turn around on its face, that is probably at times a good thing. You know, Tim Carney had an excellent article in the Examiner, I think it was yesterday, saying that leadership painted themselves into this corner because over decades, not just recently, but over decades, they've promised conservative solutions and not delivered, whether it was Medicare Part D or other things. They said, get in line and we'll get to you, get in line and we'll get to you. So leadership has certainly painted itself into this corner, but I do think that at times it comes with very negative consequences. You know, Eric Cantor's had all of this effort towards, you know, his Making Life Work campaign. You don't see a lot of things coming out of that. You know, I've been in meetings with Republicans where they fought and squabbled over whether they can support this conservative solution or whether it's going to get them primary because they can't message it right. And those are, you know, honest conversations to have. But I think that sometimes it gets in the way, you know, the absolute fear of being primary, it gets in the way of sort of wanting to go out on a limb and come up with a solution that fits today's times.
We will revisit that. Brittany, so, you know, a lot of what you do, correct me if I'm wrong, is just outreach, you know, trying to talk to people, you know, making the case for free markets and so on. How has the new media, digital media, social media changed or, you know, created what you do?
So again, mainly my job is working with Hispanics, 16 to 27, sometimes Blacks, Indians, Asians, recent immigrants, and promoting economic freedom, limited government. And, you know, the new media, it's a great tool. Instagram, Vine, when it was around, Twitter, all that is great. The problem, unfortunately, that I see is that while conservatives are using new media technologies in such a great way, it also sometimes becomes an echo chamber. So while TCOT is exploding about an issue, Black Twitter is not talking about it at all. And so that's a barrier that we really have to cross.
And forgive me for interrupting you, but just for the record, TCOT, so on Twitter, people use hashtags, okay? So people go on Twitter and they'll type in this word, right? And it'll bring up everything that comes under this word, right? And TCOT is top conservatives on Twitter. So if you want to reach conservatives on Twitter, put hash TCOT. Or if you want to reach libertarians, there's T a lot, and there's a million different versions. There's top prog for progressive, just for everyone's information. So
I think that's what I'm seeing a lot of, and I think one organization that does this really well, actually, Generation Opportunity, they use new media in a really creative way using memes. I know Young Americans for Liberty does this as well, videos, memes, that kind of thing. But again, we're using new media, and it's helping us kind of figure out what we're doing inside the movement, but we haven't harnessed new media in a way to expand the movement. And that's, again, what I'm most concerned with, I guess, at this point is looking at the demographics going forward, the GOP is going to become a regional party if we don't learn how to expand. And again, a lot of people mistake me saying this for we need to water down our principles. By no means that's what I'm saying. It's just when you look at the numbers, 1 in 4 children being born in the United States today is Hispanic. We're losing 70% of Hispanic voters at this time. If that trend continues, do the math. We no longer win. So we need to learn how to use new media technologies in a way to, you know, reach out to the young Hispanics, new, recent immigrated, you know, Black Twitter is a thing. It's a huge thing, but you never see conservative topics kind of cross that barrier. So we need to figure out a way to, you know, engage culture and also cross that barrier in a way that will bring people to the conservative movement.
by the way, just on this point, if you are Twitter inclined, I really would encourage you, if you use hashtags, to reach out and find out what the hashtags are that other groups of people use it, and then it's really cool because then it all blows up. If people start arguing with one another, it's really fun. So anyway, so Alice, I mean, the new media really drives a lot of what you do, right?
Everything that I do is based on new media, and it's interesting to tap into that. Politics is driven, our PR, money is spent on PR and marketing for a politician. If you look at the phenomenon of Ted Cruz, I was one of those people 4 or 5 years ago that was following him around with my iPhone when he was at a Republican women's luncheon or wherever he was. I was following him, and I was one of those, one of his blogger brigade. He did not announce that he was running for senator to the media. He had a blogger's call, and he announced it to all of us because he knew, one, we already had content on him, we had photos, we had videos, we could turn around content quickly that was positive and pro-Ted Cruz. He took time to build that network, and it was on very little money. I mean, I did it because I wanted him to get elected. I believed in what he was saying. And so what's interesting is, as someone who was vehemently working against Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, because that was his opponent, I am now working very closely with Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst because he was humbled. He got his clock cleaned by Ted Cruz. He also got his clock cleaned by Wendy Davis with HB2 as they were passing that. And he saw firsthand how organized and how powerful the left is at a grassroots level. Ted Cruz showed how when you're organized and as a grassroots level, you can be powerful and overcome the money issue. So it's interesting, and Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, when you look at this education issue, I went and met with Governor Perry's education policy people to see where they were at, to see if they got it. They didn't. They were completely on board with the whole Common Core philosophy of education. I was completely disillusioned by seeing the people around Governor Perry. Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, on the other side, his people advising him, they get it, and their door is open, and we have access to them. And we were able, we had a local group of moms and dads who filed suit against their school district to keep this C-scope, this curriculum, out of their schools. We were able to call the Lieutenant Governor and say, can we have a press conference at the Capitol to announce that these parents got a temporary restraining order? He was open to doing that because he knows the network that's behind this grassroots movement fighting against education. But what's funny is the media showed up, and I said, listen guys, people will say that this is political because Lieutenant Governor is running again. It is political, but not for him. The media would have never showed up if we just, a group of moms and dads who were announcing that we had a temporary restraining order, they would have never showed up. So it is political. We were using him to get the media. And I told him, I said, I can care less about your political career. I want you to fight this issue like a pissed off dad who sees children in Texas being harmed. And oh, by the way, if you fight like that, you very well might get reelected, because that's what people want to see. People are hungry for the truth, and they're tired of backdoor deals happening, in whether it's in the Capitol in Austin or the Capitol in Washington. People just want elected officials who do the right thing because it's about the next generation, frankly. And I think that when we see politicians fight like that, you're going to bring in people from different demographics.